More often than not, PC enthusiasts in general and creators who build their own PCs lose sight of what the goal of a PC they are building or planning to build is or should be. So this PC build today is laser focused on its intended purpose: recording and mixing audio, both spoken word and music, two things I do on a regular basis. That means silent operation is a top priority, as is stability, lots of RAM capacity, generous I/O, and lots of high-performance cores. If you are planning on building a PC of any kind, then I think this build will be informative and inspiring. And if you are specifically in need of an audio workstation, then I think this one is probably the best performance per dollar you can get right now, and as you'll see, a far better option than getting something like a Mac Pro. Today's sponsor, URCD Keys, is having a Valentine's Day super sale, so if you forgot to get a gift for your significant other, an OEM Windows 11 key is not exactly the most romantic of gifts, but it will be greatly appreciated, I'm sure. Just don't tell them that it was this affordable. If you buy a Windows key directly from Microsoft, you'll pay around $150 depending on your region, and that's for a home edition license. But if you buy an OEM key from URCDkeys.com, you will only have to pay $21.86 at the time of making this video if you use my coupon code C25, and that's for Windows 11 Pro. These keys work globally and you'll get them within minutes. You can pay with a credit card or with PayPal. After purchasing, go to your purchased orders page and copy the key, and then on your Windows 11 install, type in the search activate and enter your key in the appropriate field and click activate. That's it, your Windows is activated and you can change your wallpaper and customize Windows and all that. You can also get Office 2021 Professional Plus at less than half the price with my coupon code C25. Check the links in the video description for your cheap OEM Windows keys today. So for this build, I wanted silent operation first and foremost. I wanted a powerful many-core PC that would have top performance in audio production workloads, but still remain as quiet as possible. And who better to help with my silence needs than my good friends at Be Quiet. Be Quiet sent over their new Lightbase 900 DX case, which is now my favorite case to build in. Nothing comes close to this as far as convenience and space, and maybe even aesthetics, although that last one is subjective. This epic cavernous monolith is the black version of the case, but they also have a white one. And one of the interesting innovations here is how the case is designed to stand with its glass panels facing either to the right or the left, or, as I'll be using it, facing upwards with the case laying down horizontally, with this cool wraparound addressable LED lights area forming sort of a pedestal. It's gorgeous and very functional, as you'll see. It's hard to express just how massive this case is though, so here's my hand next to it for reference. Be Quiet also sent over 6 of their high-performance Silent Wings Pro 4 120mm fans for the CPU radiator. Yes, 6 of them, which I'll be using in push-pull, and another 7 fans of the 140mm variant to fully populate the case. And this will ensure the CPU I chose will remain cool under intense loads without having to ramp up the fans, which would inevitably produce noise. You don't need these many fans to put together a silence build, obviously, this is overkill, but ensuring the CPU stays cool under normal use will allow for near silent operation, which is one of the main goals here. Remember, focus on the goal of the machine. The AIO cooler for the CPU was also provided by Be Quiet, and it's their Light Loop RGB model, which is a 360 unit and has this illuminated pump block and operates mostly in complete silence, although as the tests later will show, there are some caveats. The cooler comes with 3 RGB fans, but I will be replacing them with the 6 120mm Silent Wing Pros. So the CPU I chose to use is the Ryzen 9 7950X. To me, this is the best value value CPU to get right now if you're a creator, and specifically if you work with audio, be it recording, mixing or mastering. The newer 9950X from AMD is currently going for $565 on Newegg and Amazon, which is $75 more expensive than the 7950X, while offering almost zero gains in audio-specific workloads, as you'll see in the benchmarks in a moment. So with the 9950X, you'll be wasting $70. That could be put into more storage, for example. The exception here would be if you are going for a small form factor PC, where the more efficient 9950X might be worth the extra cost, but with that form factor, you might have to sacrifice on noise levels, so again, it all depends on what your goal is. The same thought process went into choosing a motherboard. I found this open box ProART X670e on sale on Black Friday at the end of last year, and I paid €340 for it, while the newer X670e version of this board from Asus goes for a whopping €887 locally, so that's $900. So this was a massive $570 saving, and honestly the newer X870e ProART is actually worse than the X670e for this specific purpose, and in general it doesn't really offer anything significant other than a few additional lanes, which are mostly irrelevant. The audio shielding is actually better on the X670e version, for instance. Now, as far as RAM goes, I want to apologize to Team Group, who provided expert DDR5 desktop memory at 6400, 64GB, so that's the 4x16 sticks. Also a couple of their C47 2TB SSDs, so these are from their Creator series of products, but unfortunately they didn't get to me in time to be included in this build, as PC components are now getting stuck in customs for months if they are sent from outside the EU, particularly if coming from the China region. But luckily, G-Skill came to the rescue and provided this baller DDR5 64GB kit, the Trident Z5 Neo RGB, which is rated at 6000 megatransfers per second at CL32. 2 sticks at 6000 means that stability won't be an issue, and one area where DDR5 did bring significant performance gains versus DDR4 is in DSP and VST performance. So for audio production, this is a fantastic kit for both throughput and capacity. Shout out to G-Skill for generously providing the RAM for this build, and I'll be hopefully featuring Team Group's products in the near future also. I already have another build in mind. As for storage, I'm trying out this 1TB 990 EVO from Samsung, which features a quirky hybrid design, so it supports 2 PCIe Gen 5 lanes, but then 4 PCIe Gen 4 lanes for a rated 5000 MB per second sequential read. So I think the idea is to have PCIe 5 for bursts and PCIe 4 for longevity and low heat production. I don't know, but as an OS drive, it's perfectly capable and very affordable. For projects and storing VSTs and sample libraries, I'll be using the 4-Gen Nimbus NVMe, which is a Gen 4 rated at 7000 MB per second sequential reads and 6100 writes, and more importantly, being Gen 4 means it doesn't require extra cooling, and a 2TB capacity will be plenty for the libraries that I use. Now, having clean power delivery is extremely important here, so for the PSU I bought this ROG Strix 850W Oro edition from Asus, which is marketed as a gaming PSU but has a cybernetics rating of A++ for quiet operation and cybernetics gold rating for efficiency, and this PSU does actually stay absolutely silent under stress, which can't be said for many of the PSUs out there that claim silent operation, even from reputable brands. At $220 in my region, it's obviously higher than what most 850W PSUs out there cost, but you have to keep in mind the specific goal of this build: to be silent and reliable without sacrificing on performance and without costing a fortune. Now you might notice that there's something missing here. Where is the GPU? Well, there is a GPU, just not a discrete one. Having a discrete GPU would add unnecessary noise to the system and also potentially block some of the airflow. The included iGPU on the 7950X is plenty fine for what this system will be used for. There is one company out there making VST plugins that work on GPUs, but they are the exception. 99.9% of all VSTs use the CPU only, so no need for a discrete GPU in this build. A passively cooled one was an option, but it would be superfluous as I'm only outputting 4K 60 to a single monitor. Building on the 900DX was a dream. I really love this case. I love the aesthetics and also the variety of options to install components and all the room to work in without getting scratches all over my arms. It's not going to be for everyone as it's fairly larger than most PC cases, but if you have space on your desk, I can't recommend this case enough. My audio production setup looks extra cool and inviting with that warm orange glow that comes from the case's LED wraparound strip. Now, like I said, keeping the system quiet was fundamental, and under a typical DAW load, the machine hovered around 25 decibels, which is extremely quiet. Even while exporting a project, the machine produces less than 30 dB of noise, which is whisper levels of quietness. In fact, only when running Cinebench R23 multi-core was I able to get the system to get close to 40 dB. 40 decibels would be unusable for an audio recording scenario, but there's no audio workload that stresses the CPU to the level that Cinebench does. And as far as temperature is concerned, if you are curious, while idle, the 7950X in this system ran at 40 degrees Celsius, which might seem high, but you have to remember that the CPU idles at 60 to 80 degrees Celsius in a typical PC case. Under a typical DAW session, it didn't change much, staying at 33 degrees Celsius on average, which is fantastic. And while running Cinebench R23 for 10 minutes, it topped at a toasty 91 degrees Celsius, according to hardware info, but again, there's no audio workload that will stress the CPU like that. So when it comes to cooling performance and consequent silent operation, the goal has been achieved. As far as raw compute performance, digital audio workstations don't work quite like other software, like games or video editing software or Photoshop. For instance, while a Threadripper CPU would make sense for a video editing machine, it would actually be detrimental in an audio workstation because it will likely have lower clocks than a current high-end 16-core CPU, be it from Intel or AMD. That might change with the next generation of Threadrippers if they maintain the same clocks as the top Ryzen chips though. The reason for that is that while a DAW, or a digital audio workstation, does support multiple cores and will distribute work through as many threads as you have, if you saturate even a single one of those cores, then you will get audio glitches in real-time playback. This won't be much of a problem mixing or mastering because the data is buffered and stems are generally consolidated, but in real-time playback of unbuffered data, or especially while recording, it can become an issue depending on how much stuff is going on in your session. Also, the DAW that I use, which is called Studio One, only uses big boy cores, or what Intel calls performance cores. So for this DAW specifically, it would make no sense to get one of the new 200 series Intel CPUs, as those have few actual performance cores, or the E-cores would not be used by this DAW. Now, what about Apple Macs? Aren't most people doing audio work running Macs? While that has traditionally been the case, that is something that is actually changing as Macs have been getting excessively expensive and just rubbish overall. Although on the software side, the stability that macOS provides is a big plus over the absolute disaster that is Windows 11 for productivity environments. The move to Apple's Silicon also rendered a lot of plugins and VSTs unusable, as not all plugin vendors have the resources to port them over to the new ARM-based chips. That's one thing that I like about Windows. VSTs that I bought 15 or even 20 years ago still work today on this PC. If you were to spec a Mac similarly to this build, with 1TB less storage but with 64GB of RAM, you'd have to go with the M2 Ultra, seeing as the Mac Pro doesn't support the M3 chips yet, let alone the M4. So you are only getting effectively 16 high-performance cores running at 3.68 GHz. This is just a theoretical exercise, mind you. There's no way to do an apples to apples or apples to PC comparison here, but if you were to use a DAW not optimized for efficiency cores, then you'd get less performance out of a Mac like this compared to the system I built. Such a Mac Pro, even though it would perform worse, would set you back an absurd $7,400. Granted, you get a much more powerful GPU CPU and all that, but we are specifically looking at audio production workloads. Keep that in mind. Keep the goal in mind, always. In contrast, my PC build will set you back around $1,900 without the discounts that I got on Black Friday, so just MSRPs, were you to buy all of the parts yourself. So that's over $5,000 in savings for arguably a better machine by going with this PC versus a Mac Pro. That's $5,000 you can put towards some synths or some orchestral libraries, or even better, a beautiful vintage Nagra reel-to-reel recorder. Looking at some benchmarks, saturating the DAW with DSP plugins until the audio starts glitching sees the 7950X and the 9950X pretty much on par. So like I said, there's very little reason to get the AMD 9000s over the 7000s for audio production workloads. It's a 1 to 2% difference depending on buffer size. You can see how Intel's latest 285K can handle more DSP instances, but in my case, the DAW that I use actually sees a performance regression with these 2000 series CPUs. If you use Reaper or Ableton, then the 285K might be a better choice, but it costs double the 7950X right now, because I guess Intel hasn't gotten the memo that the Core Ultra 200 series is unbuyable. And you can also see how performance falls off a cliff once you go down to something like the 7900X or 9900X, and even more so with the X3D variant of the 9800X3D in this type of workload, because while the Vcache is relevant for memory-sensitive applications, it does jack all for frequency-sensitive workloads, where the sweet spot of 12 to 16 cores and high frequencies is more important than extra local cache. If you run multiple instances of Contact with sample libraries, then there are a few niche cases where a 3D Vcache AMD chip could make sense. Here, with a buffer size of 64, the 9800X3D does take the lead, for instance, so this is running multiple instances of Contact, streaming large sample libraries. There's basically no difference between the 7950X and the 9950X, which are better all-rounders for audio workloads. And if you increase the buffer size to 512, then the 9800X3D's advantage goes away. Really, on the AMD side, there's no reason to get anything other than the 7950X right now for audio production work. And I don't think the upcoming 9950X3D will change that, given that it will probably cost almost twice as much as the 7950X right now, if the recent leaks are to be believed, and the benefits will be marginal and only in niche use cases. So I hope this video was entertaining and informative, and I hope it shows how important it is to plan your build with its specific goal in mind as you decide what components to get, so that you can spend more money on the things that matter and less on the things that don't. How does this goal-focused approach translate to a gaming-focused build or a video editing workstation, you might be wondering? Well, subscribe to the channel and you'll soon find out. A big thanks to my patrons for their continued support and for making these videos possible. Join my Patreon for a couple dollars per month and get exclusive access to the Cortex Discord server. Shout out to Be Quiet for their fantastic support, and to G-Skill also. Check the video description for links to the products used in this build. Thanks for watching, and until the next one.